Let's meet our first guest, Mr. Malcolm X, the leader of the so-called black supremacy movement, the Muslims, and that's spelled M-U-S-L-I-M-S.
Yes, sir.
And I understand that all of the members of the Muslims have the last name of X.
That's correct.
And why is that?
Well, the X actually identifies or distinguishes those of us who are followers of Mr. Elijah Muhammad from those who are not.
I see.
And it also exits us from the usage and the identification and the connection with the slave names that were given to our people during slavery time by the slave master.
I see.
And it will stand until, as you know, Mr. Muhammad, our leader and teacher, he received his name from God. And those of us who follow him will receive our names. There will come a time when we will receive our names, just like the Bible says in the last days that God will give the lost sheep or the lost people names out of his own mouth. And we feel that we're living at a day and in a time when those biblical prophecies will reach their fulfillment here in America.
Mr. X, I have no argument with your wanting to call yourself X or Y or Z or anything, and I respect your motives, but Shakespeare said, what's in a name? What difference does it make?
Sir, when you say what's in a name, black people here in America who have gone into Mississippi using the names Smith and Jones and Murphy have encountered serious barriers which immediately were eliminated when they used names such as Sharif, Hassan, Diyah, and things of that sort. So when Shakespeare said, what's in a name, he probably had never lived in America with a dark skin.
They took Arabic names to make the people think they were of Arabic extraction.
A good example of that last year was mentioned in Jet, where this so-called Negro from Florida spoke with a French accent in Mississippi and gave himself another name, a foreign name, and was accepted into the veteran hospitals, white veteran hospitals. They took him for an African.
Right.
So there's much in a name. And
I understand.
Yeah.
Mr. X, I said in introducing you earlier that your group has been charged with being anti-white, anti-Semitic, and a kind of black Ku Klux Klan. Now, you've heard that charge before.
Yes, sir.
And what is your answer to it?
It's nothing could be farther from the truth. First, when you introduced me as the leader of the black supremacist movement here in Harlem or here in New York, that in itself, too, is incorrect. I'm Mr. Elijah Muhammad's minister to the New York Muslim area. And he is the spiritual leader and teacher of all of the Muslims. And in fact, he's the spiritual leader and teacher of the fastest growing group of Muslims in the Western Hemisphere. And here in the New York area, I represent him. I'm his minister.
Where does the word Muslim come from?
The word Muslim is an Arabic word, which means, it comes from the word Islam. Islam is the name of the religion that means complete submission to the will of the divine supreme being. And Muslim means one who has submitted himself to the will of the divine supreme being.
Now, what's the difference between a Muslim and a Muslim?
Muslim is only the anglicized pronunciation and spelling of the Arabic word Muslim.
I see. Then it is the same thing.
Same thing. It's like if you were in Georgia, you'd say horse, and in New York you say horse.
I understand.
Same thing.
Now, where do the charges come from that you are anti-white?
I think that comes from people who lack the proper understanding and who have failed to do research. I think that some people who are bigoted and narrow-minded create the phrase, and others just follow suit by parroting without actually looking into what Mr. Muhammad is teaching and what he is doing. If you recall, and I think this is the best answer, when Time magazine wrote an article in July or August of '59, in which they said that Mr. Muhammad had successfully eliminated from among his followers the use of alcohol, the use of dope, the use of profanity, adultery, and things of that sort. But then at the same time, they turned around and accused him of teaching black supremacy. Now, mind you, they credited him, without realizing it, with reforming the morals of the so-called Negroes, and then in the next breath, they accused him of black supremacy. In the same article, they pointed out that the police chiefs in Los Angeles and across the country marveled at the degree of discipline and obedience and respect for the law that existed among his followers. And at the same time, they said that this is what worries the police department. Why, that's absurd. And I think that his teaching, Mr. Muhammad's teaching, gives such dignity. It puts such a sincere and strong dignity in those black people who listen to his teaching and accept his teaching, that they have had that inferiority complex and attitude for so long that when they change, it's so noticeable that people who don't understand, they associate it with an air of supremacy. But I think that's other than true.
Malcolm X, the Chicago American, on February 22nd, said that your leader, Elijah Muhammad, wants to unite the darker races in exterminating the white race.
I think, sir, that the same, and this is the same writer who wrote that, didn't even take the time during the convention. We had a convention 3 days at that time. That writer didn't take the time to come to the convention and listen for himself what Mr. Muhammad is teaching or what he stated his aims were. I think had he done so, that he would have written that article other than the way he did.
Do you or your organization receive funds from the United Arab Republic?
That's another thing that could not be farther from the truth. We receive funds from no one, no outside government other than right here. We receive funds from ourselves. All of the finance, all of our projects are financed by so-called Negroes here in America who believe in Mr. Muhammad's program.
You keep saying so-called Negro, Mr. X. What do you mean by that?
Yes, sir. I'm glad you asked me that, too, because when you ask a person his nationality and he says German, it identifies him with a nation called Germany.
Right.
If you ask him his nationality and he says French, it identifies him with a nation called France. If he says English, it identifies him with a nation called England.
Right.
Now, if you ask him his nationality and he says Negro, what has it identified him with?
Only the color of his skin.
But no, Negro is a Spanish word, not an English word. And here in the school curriculum in this country, they have taught us that black is something derogatory. So most Negroes take offense when referred to as black. But
except in Africa.
But understand. But at the same time, they say that the word Negro means black in Spanish. And they say that if Negro means black in Spanish, then all of the black Spanish-speaking people in South and Central America would also be called Negroes. And if you call a Puerto Rican or a Cuban or a Mexican or somebody who is black a Negro, he takes offense. A Spanish-speaking black person will not accept the term Negro.
Well, I agree with you, Mr. X. The fact is that many people who make the same mistake about Negroes will speak of nationality and say that so-and-so is a Jew. That's a faith, not a nationality.
Negro is not a faith.
No, Negro is the color of a skin. A man, when you say that you resent, or Negroes resent the word black, I've had Tom Mboya here on a couple of occasions, and he tells me that in Africa, the word black is applied by them to themselves.
Yes.
There are the blacks or the Africans.
But not Negro.
No.
Negro carries with it a stigma.
Well, only because of the unfortunate propaganda through the years, but this doesn't mean that it should.
Sir, Negro is a word that was made up for us, not by we ourselves, but by our slave master during slavery time. Now, people of India, you have people in India who are darker than people in Africa.
Yes.
They're not called Negroes. You just can't, when you trace it down or try and use...
what would you call yourself?
A black man. I refer to myself as a black man, despite complexion.
I should tell the radio audience that you're very fair.
Very light.
Yes.
And, but, see, just like...
Wouldn't colored be a more applicable word?
No, sir. Colored to us means that which has been changed from what it originally was. Those of us today who have been taught by Mr. Muhammad, we accept the term black. We refer to ourselves as black despite complexion, and this gives us unity. As long as you have a group of people like the Negroes, different complexions, and they lay stress upon their complexion, that creates a division. And what we need, since one of our characteristic qualities is our disunity, we as so-called Negroes in America don't need any terms that tend to lend to that disunity. We need to be united instead of disunited.
Malcolm X, why is it that Roy Wilkins of the NAACP and Thurgood Marshall, their counsel, are so opposed to your movement? Are they not hard-working individuals for equality and desegregation?
Sir, I don't think that Mr. Wilkins and Mr. Marshall are actually opposed to Mr. Muhammad's movement, because Mr. Muhammad's movement is actually doing what they are advocating, the betterment of our people. Many people have put words in Mr. Wilkins' mouth and have put words in Mr. Marshall's mouth. But I don't think that men of that standing and of that caliber and with that intelligence would cast opinions about a group such as ours without coming to us or coming among us and studying us firsthand themselves.
Mr. X, I must tell you that Thurgood Marshall has been here on many occasions, and he has stated to me that he is opposed to your group. Now, he's a learned and informed man, and he's told me this is not something that I'd heard.
I think you'll find, sir, that many Negroes who reach...
I wish you'd stop calling me sir. I was just a corporal.
Well, sir, one of the things Mr. Muhammad teaches us is to respect everyone. And I do it
not... You can call me Bary. I think that's enough respect.
Well, yes, sir. I'll call you Bary.
Much better than hey you. I've been called that.
But what you will find that one of the things characteristic, too, about Mr. Muhammad's followers is courtesy is a part of our religion.
And I respect it.
And it's difficult for us to separate ourselves from our religious teachings.
May I say, as a former GI, that there are ways of saying sir and other ways of saying sir, and sometimes it doesn't sound very respectful.
Oh, well, I understand.
Let me pause here and tell you that I'm talking with Mr. Malcolm X, the leader of the movement of the Muslims, or Muslims. He returned to my guest. My guest is Malcolm X, the leader, or associate leader, I guess you'd call it, of the movement called the Muslims. Mr. X, you've denied here that your group is anti-white, anti-Semitic, and in some cases anti-Negro. A colleague of mine and an old friend, Mike Wallace, last summer showed some films of your local rally. And he charged then that you have a stormtrooper type operation, and that your leader, Elijah Muhammad, has a bodyguard of the elite troop character. Is that so?
I wouldn't say that we have a storm. Before you go to that, so you asked me about Thurgood Marshall and Wilkins. I would like to make a comment.
Go ahead.
Number one, it hurts me if they said what they did, which I've never heard it, but it hurts me whenever any so-called Negroes like that speak out against us, because we think that black people have enough enemies today fighting to make the mistake of fighting each other, fighting among themselves and fighting each other. And I'm very reluctant to make any statement against any so-called Negro today who even professes to be fighting the battle for justice for the so-called Negroes. If they want to attack us, they're free to do so, but we find that we have our hands full enough fighting for justice for the so-called Negro to spend time fighting Mr. Marshall and Mr. Wilkins.
Well, I understand that, but on the other hand, in a democratic society, Mr. X, no one expects all Negroes or all anything to agree.
But you got a new Negro on the scene today, sir, who's rising up faster than I think even Mr. Wilkins and Mr. Marshall are aware of.
Who's that?
And I said a new Negro. When I say a new Negro, a new collective Negro.
Yes.
Whereas in the past, Negroes were reluctant to stick together on certain issues, and they were reluctant to exhibit action other than passive. Today they'll try it passive if passive will work, and if passive doesn't work, they resort to what will work.
What do you mean by what will work? Does that mean violence?
No, sir. Because I would not want you to think that the followers of Mr. Muhammad are people of violence. But when you stop to think, sir, who does Mr. Wilkins speak for? Who does Mr. Thurgood Marshall speak for? If Roy Wilkins and Thurgood Marshall combined advertised the fact that they were going to give a lecture or a speech Saturday afternoon on 125th Street and 7th Avenue in Harlem, they probably would be lucky to get 1,000 people. If you advertised the fact that Mr. Muhammad was going to speak at that same place, you couldn't get within 4 blocks of the place. This is facts. Now,
well, Mr. X, to use your very analogy, I'm sure that if Hitler was around, he'd draw a pretty big crowd too.
I'm surprised that a man of your intelligence and experience would use the name Hitler in the same breath.
No, but you've told me about the crowd. Sometimes, the public is not always right.
Well, then who speaks for who? This is the thing. If Roy Wilkins is the spokesman...
I assume that Roy Wilkins and Thurgood Marshall speak for all of the paid-up members or contributors of the NAACP. Now, I don't know what that number amounts to.
Yes, sir.
But people that contribute to an organization obviously believe in it,
yes,
and they represent these people. I don't think Roy Wilkins ever said that he speaks for all the Negroes of the United States, and I know Thurgood Marshall not only professionally but personally. And I'm sure that Thurgood Marshall doesn't believe that he speaks for all of the Negroes, because there are some Negroes he has very little use for, and he wouldn't want to speak for them.
Well, there are no Negroes that we don't have any use for. We love all of them.
But you're putting them in the same category, if I may say, as the racists on the other side put the Negro. You're making all Negroes good Negroes and all whites bad whites.
We think, sir, that the bad qualities and bad characteristics that you might detect in the so-called Negroes today are due to sociological conditions under which they live, which we feel they are not responsible for. Most of the faults that you find, faults of drunkenness, faults of dope addiction and things of that sort, we don't feel that the Negro in America, is having undergone 310 years of slavery, during which time he was stripped completely of his culture and anything that would give him dignity or racial cohesiveness to the point where he would want to stand up, only under extreme circumstances. We just don't hold him responsible for that. These who have had enough...
You're not going to excuse it.
We're not excusing it in this day and time, but we don't hold him responsible.
You are then saying, if I understand you correctly, that all Negroes who are involved in narcotics traffic, addiction, drunkenness, whatever, these people are to be excused?
No, sir. But I am saying that I think that the white man who is familiar with the history of the Negro in America, when he sees the faults that the Negro displays today here in America, the white man himself should be very slow to criticize or condemn that Negro for his condition.
Mr. X, I neither criticize nor condemn. I'm trying to get a story, except I'd hate to think that we're going to present the satire of a poor, downtrodden individual who's just crooked because he never had a chance. Because some of our finest citizens in this community, Negro and white, have come out of those poor, downtrodden conditions. Principle and the fiber of character are very strong things. They overcome a great many setbacks. And I'm not going to tell you that the Negroes have had an easy row to hoe. They've had a very tough row. But isn't it strange that out of that very background have come some of your most remarkable people?
Yes, sir. And there are those few. We don't clap our hands and say hooray over the few. We're thinking of the masses.
Oh, I think there are many more than few.
Who are yet in that downtrodden condition.
I agree. But, Mr. X, we're getting far away from the subject. What about the elite bodyguard and the stormtrooper type operation that Mike Wallace showed on film last year?
I think that Mike Wallace showed, I don't think he showed anything that you could call stormtrooper, but he probably showed something that could be classified as elite in the sense that the followers of Mr. Muhammad are taught discipline and courtesy and hygiene, physical hygiene, mental hygiene, spiritual hygiene, to the point where they are very easy to distinguish between others.
Mr. X, you've just told me about the great mental hygiene of your leader. Is it true that he was in prison in the federal penitentiary for 3 years, beginning in 1943, for subversive activity?
He was in prison for refusing to go to the army, for refusing to fight. He is a Muslim. He teaches the religion of peace, and he was sent to prison for refusing to go to the war. That was why he was sent to prison.
I am given to understand that it's because he aligned himself with the Black Dragon Society of Japan.
That's absurd. If he had aligned himself with the Black Dragon Society of Japan, sir, well, bring in your Federal Bureau of Investigation and ask them.
Well, Mr. X, a man does not go to prison under our society if he can prove that he is a legitimate conscientious objector. We had many such during the war.
Sir, I think you'll find that prisons were filled with conscientious objectors. We have brothers right at this moment who are serving prison sentences for being conscientious objectors.
Because possibly that their background did not show a legitimate reason. They became conscientious objectors for the purposes of the draft.
I don't quite understand.
Well, let me give you a very well-known example. There was a man named Lou Ayres,
yes,
who is a Quaker. And Mr. Ayres, known as a Quaker and a very religious man, would not bear arms. So he became a member of an ambulance unit, and he did not bear arms. He was a conscientious objector. The medical corps was filled with hundreds of men who would not bear arms but worked as laboratory technicians and the rest. But those who suddenly became conscientious objectors on the day that the draft called them were put in prison because there was no record of their ever having been a member of a religious group or sect that would prove this point.
Yes, well, I think you'll find, sir, that nearly 100 of Mr. Muhammad's followers went to prison along with him for refusing to go to the army. And by refusing to go to the army, they absolutely didn't even register. They had no part of the war whatsoever, but it wasn't in line with Japan or because of what Japan was doing.
Let me quote to you from the Chicago American. It says here that in 1942, the Chicago Herald-American, this newspaper's predecessor, exposed a fifth-column plot designed to unite the world's dark-skinned people under Japan and exterminate the white race. Elijah Muhammad, alias Elijah Poole, alias Elijah Mahmoud, was accused by the FBI of being one of the leaders in this fantastic plot. When the FBI tracked him to his mother's home in Chicago, they found him rolled up in a carpet under her feet.
Sir, I think you will find...
Well, okay. This is the FBI. You said you wanted the FBI quote. Leaders of the sect were charged with violating the Federal Espionage Act. Conviction under that law carried a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison and a $10,000 fine for each offense. The FBI said the subversive groups, numbering 100,000 persons throughout the United States, had been organizing for more than 10 years under the Japanese Black Dragon Society. A 4-month undercover investigation by the Herald-American brought to light the activities of these groups, and these findings were turned over to federal authorities. When questioned by Assistant U.S. Attorneys William J. Connor, John Keeley, and Leroy Crine, all the leaders denied they were citizens of the United States, all asserted they were born in West Asia, that they were Asiatics and Muslims and not subject to American laws. Records, however, showed they were all born in this country, and Muhammad and one other were arraigned on sedition charges and held in bond after the U.S. Commissioner said these men were leaders in this dangerous subversive plot. It was at their behest that many of the others evaded the draft. They also advocated direct alliance with this nation's enemy, Japan.
Sir, I completely disagree, and I read that in the Chicago paper when I was out there last week. If Mr. Muhammad and his followers were arrested for that, were they convicted for that?
Well, they went to jail for 3 years. That's a pretty good sign.
Sir, no. They went to jail for refusing to register for the draft, but they were not convicted of any kind of espionage. And, sir, today they aren't on the Attorney General's subversive list, and if they said they weren't citizens, the United States Senate right now is putting on a filibuster in Washington, D.C. to prove that the black man here is not a citizen.
Yes, but I don't accept that, do you?
Oh, you are an individual, sir.
The federal law of this country states that anyone naturally born in the United States is a citizen of this country, whether he be of the black race, the yellow race, or the white race. And as a matter of fact, the Japanese in California had the same difficulty for a very long time. But anyone born in this country, naturally born, is an automatic citizen, and it can never be denied.
Do they deny these Japanese and white people civil rights? You see, civil rights makes a man a citizen. You got an argument in Washington right now that revolves around civil rights, which is supposed to make Negroes citizens.
No, it's supposed to give them voting privileges. It does not have anything to do with a citizen.
A citizen has voting privileges.
I know.
And if he doesn't have voting privileges, he's not a citizen.
Well, he has voting privileges in the South if he pays his poll tax, and I'm against that.
But understand, sir, and I think that you're intelligent enough to see that any time you have to make new bills or pass new bills to make to give voting privileges or voting rights to approximately 20 million black people, then you just can't call those people citizens.
Well, let's go back to your leader. According to the Chicago newspaper, at a meeting September the 13th, 1942, this same Elijah Muhammad told his followers, and this is a direct quote, "The red background of the flag of Islam represents the sun. The crescent and star represent the moon and the planets. The other flag you see there, the stars and stripes, is the symbol of the white devils. There is only one flag for us, and that is the flag of Islam. See how it compares with the Japanese flag of the rising sun. The reason for the likeness is that the Japanese are our brothers. They're the only ones